Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another Basement Radio Arcade podcast, another BRAP rant. Hope everyone's doing well this evening. Thank you so much for joining us live. Dat Smitty Guy says, yo. What's going on, Dat Smitty Guy? Hello, Hero Down Under. How are you today? I believe you're in Australia, if I'm not mistaken. JC 2013 says, what's up, BRAP in chat? Do me a favor, everyone. Retweet the link that I just dropped here in the live chat. Retweet it. Put it on Facebook. Let everyone know we're live. Orange, Australia. So where's the Orange, Australia? Like, where? Not familiar. I know the big cities of Australia. Perth. Sydney. Forget the capital of Australia. Begins with the letter C. Dr. Barton Van Nostrand says, as long as good games are coming to the PS5, I'm happy. First party will come when ready. Yes, Canberra, that is the capital of Australia. Thank you for that. So, you're three hours outside of Sydney. Okay, gotcha. Bless says, I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I think that's where Falky's from. But anyhow, welcome everyone. Also want to welcome, this gentleman really doesn't need introduction. He's the architect, who may be making an appearance on WWE Monday Night Raw as the architect, managing a stable of wrestlers. With us, Game Logic. What's going on, Logic?
Not much, man. I am, so after my discovery that all the seasons of WWE Raw are available on Peacock, I went back to the beginning of the Ruthless Aggression era and I'm starting to binge watch. Planning to binge watch 6 years of WWE Raw. So I had forgotten. It's a great trip through nostalgia.
Yeah.
So this is the start of the Ruthless Aggression era was like April 2002. It was just after Linda and Vince had done the split where Ric Flair was 50% owner of the WWF at the time.
Did you watch that Ric Flair? Did you watch that?
SmackDown.
Did you watch Ric Flair?
Yeah.
His first appearance on Raw. Okay.
I don't know if it was his appearance. I think so where I'm coming in and starting to watch, he's been on for a while.
Okay.
And they had just done the draft. They had said, Vince, you have SmackDown. Rick, you have Raw.
Okay.
And they had done the draft. I had forgotten in the draft that they had split up the Dudley Boys.
That's right. So they did.
So they'd sent Bubba to Raw, and Vince had taken Devon and put him on SmackDown. I had also forgotten that this was the Undertaker's American Badass phase. I'd completely forgotten that his theme music was the Limp Bizkit song.
Yeah, keep rolling. Yeah.
Oh man, so it's hilarious. Yeah, it's a good trip. Good trip through nostalgia.
Yeah, it's funny. I literally watched the intro, Batista's intro, before the show started.
Oh, nice.
That intro it's so good. He does like the machine gun gesture with his hands. Well, the pyros, it's so good.
So I had forgotten. So Bubba Dudley's intro, and I don't know if he was using he and Devon were both using the Dudley Boys tag team intro, but his you could see the pyrotechnics coming from the other side of the Civic Center, and whatever graphic they were using or whatever. Because remember. So now I think they have the ability to project, they have a projector and they can project images and overlays and stuff. Yeah. But back then it was all physical effects. So
yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was funny.
They would do a missile or something.
Yeah. And I told you I had that album, and amazingly, as it started. That was when that album came out, WWF Forcible Entry, where they had all their intro songs and stuff on there.
Jeez, I wonder who picked the name of that album out. It's a Vince McMahon joke, by the way, for those who didn't pick up on that, but because of recent allegations of Vince. Oh, boycott actors says pause. Yeah, pause, exactly. Vince McMahon. I tell you, going back and looking at some of the matches, and we talked about Trish Stratus and all these the female wrestlers during the Ruthless Aggression era and the Attitude era. I mean, looking back at it now, it's like, oh, now this all kind of makes sense.
What's hilarious, it's so funny because, so again, in this episode that I'm picking up on and watching, like, Ric Flair comes in the middle of Trish, and I had forgotten this other female wrestler, Terry, who I think had been on, like, before Trish came on, but, like, and
she
made
was
them do...
She's the valet of, what's his face? Dustin Rhodes, who at WWF was Goldust.
Okay, right.
Yeah, she was his valet. But yeah, go ahead.
So he's making them do a bikini match with a paddle on the pole match. So when the winner wins, they have to climb this pole, get the paddle, and then they're allowed to spank the user. So, and I'm watching this and I'm like, there's no way in the world that they would be allowed to do this today. But then what's hilarious is when they're doing like all their like ring soap opera stuff and they're cursing, they're bleeping out the curse words. And I'm like, I'm 99% sure that they'd let them say those curse words. So it's just weird that like it's the whole thing that's always weird about Western culture and American culture in particular, that we get more and more prudish about sexual content, but then like violence and curse words and stuff like that, with that we just let that go all over the place. So it's just an interesting sociological study looking back at it.
It is interesting. You're right. Like we are very prudish with sexual content, but cursing, violence. I mean, but I will say I do think the violence though, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Logic, but I think the violence has kind of toned down a little bit from like the 80s in movies, at least.
It has, and what's funny in certain contexts, and then other things, for instance, you look at The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is a show that would have never been on like in the 80s or 90s, like anywhere, like not even on cable TV. But what's funny is, I guess I'll get a chance to see it kind of go down, is I guess during the Ruthless Aggression era, it was kind of wide open like it is now, like with bikini matches and stuff. But I forget what there is. There's something in the Ruthless Aggression era was a span of about 6 years, but somewhere in the 6 year span, like something happened, and they had to roll a lot of that back, and they call it. Oh no, maybe it was at the end of the. Oh, that's right, near the end of the. So after the Ruthless Aggression era, there was a PG era of the WWE. Where unfortunately after Eddie Guerrero passed and Chris Benoit passed, they rolled a lot of that stuff back and they tried to make it like more family friendly. And I think the shows had gone from like TVMA to actually like PG. Like I forget what the lower, like it was like TV 14 or something. So they had tried to roll a lot of that back. For a while before it got crazy again.
Yeah, I mean even like it's definitely a little more. I don't want to say risque, but compared to like the PG era, after the Ruthless Aggression era, I feel like now they've kind of found like a happy medium, where it's not like too PG, but I think part of the reason why they became PG, more family friendly, is because they were losing sponsors. They were losing advertisement on their weekly shows. And,
well, the funny thing is so that happened, but then when they went to the PG era, they then lost viewership and revenue went down for a while, and that's part of the reason they snapped back and became like more of the of the risque stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I went to a show Monday Night Raw about a year ago. I took my 9-year-old. I mean, it wasn't too bad. Like, it wasn't overly risque or anything like that. I wouldn't have taken him to an Attitude Era Raw or a Ruthless Aggression Raw, because that stuff was a little more mature, too mature for him. But I was thinking, like, I really like, and I've always thought the Attitude Era was the best, but now that because you mentioned the Dudleys, I'm so, like the Ruthless Aggressive Era may be the best era because it introduced matches that have never been done, like the TLC match between the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardys. And that first TLC match they did was just epic. Now I know the Attitude Era, the infamous Hell in the Cell '98 with the Undertaker and Mankind, but those TLC matches were, I mean, wow, they were doing stuff that I hadn't seen done. I shouldn't say that. I saw a little bit of that in ECW. And WWE barred a lot of the stuff from like during the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression era. Like some of the things they were doing was that they had borrowed a little bit from ECW, because ECW, for anyone who remembers ECW, which was Extreme Championship Wrestling, that was Paul Heyman's promotion, who he's now with WWE and the valet of Roman Reigns. That ECW really pushed the boundaries in the early, mid, late 90s with violence and there's hardcore matches and the objectification of women in matches. I mean, they really pushed the envelope. So that wasn't that idea, what Vince McMahon and the WWF, WWE did at that time wasn't new. They borrowed a lot of that from ECW. And if you ever go back and watch some of the old ECW shows, you'll see some of that stuff there.
Right.
Sorry, I went on a wrestling rant. That's all. But Logic, I might go back and watch that stuff now. That's pretty cool that they have all that there. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Did you see that you can watch the pay-per-views?
It's super interesting just because for me, like back then, and even it's probably why I don't watch it now. Like I had to be. So I was doing slightly different work. I had to be in like a certain mode, right? It had to be at like a certain point of my. So and quite honestly, I had to be like there were these periods in my life where, like for a month or so at a time, like I didn't have I wasn't as deep. I wasn't as deep into like something super technical or something super or just. I had like more downtime and I just kind of needed to have like that month or 2 month time of just kind of turning my brain off. So, and that's when I would watch wrestling. Like I wouldn't watch it like the whole time. There were just every 10 months or so, I would go on like a 2 month binge. So it's just super interesting to kind of go back like to that time in my life, and kind of revisit that stuff.
Yeah. And I stand corrected, by the way. Boycott Activity says, I thought the TLC matches were considered Attitude Era. You're right, because the first TLC match was in 2000, and the Ruthless Aggression era started in 2002. Yeah, I've even I've gone back and I've watched some of the old Raws, and I've even gone back and like watched some of the old WCW stuff. I don't know if do they still have that on Peacock, like the old Nitros. They had that during the WWE streaming app when that was around.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I told you I'm a wrestling casual. I like outside of the WWE. Okay. Even back then, like I don't even really watch SmackDown. Like I was exclusively Raw. Like there was just no way I could pony up to like watching wrestling like two nights a week.
Yeah,
but yeah, so AEW, ECW, all that stuff like was just outside my bounds.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I did take a little bit of a break from watching wrestling and have really recently got back into it. I'll watch like WWE. I'll watch Raw and I'll watch SmackDown. Try to watch it. Some days I can't get to it and I'll just like watch the YouTube clips, the highlights. But I do watch AEW Collision, and then when I podcast on Wednesdays, I'll have AEW playing in the background for AEW Dynamite. So,
well, it's really funny. It's also funny, like at this beginning of this Ruthless Aggression era, you saw a lot of older wrestlers from like the 80s and 90s who were really on like their last like campaign, right? They were really on their way out. Granted, you had some people come back who had like these really, really super long runs that like crossed these generations and eras. Ric Flair, HBK. But then you saw people like Razor Ramon, like is on his he's on his last legs, right at this part of the era. Kevin Nash, Diesel, they're going to be gone soon. Mr. Perfect. Right, and Great Scott. I was just watching. I'm about midway through this episode. I was watching and Boss Man. I'm like, holy cow, man! Like these are like these guys' last few matches, like as really main members of the cast. So it was interesting. I guess APA had gotten drafted to SmackDown, so like NWO came in and took over their little office. Right, they had their little door like in a frame that they used to call their office.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's pretty funny.
No, that's definitely a good era, and I do think right now they are just stacked with talent. Like they are. This may be the. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this era plays out, but I think it's going to go down as probably one of the better ones, because of the amount of talent they have. So they have some really good storylines going on right now. The storyline with Roman Reigns, he's been, champion for like 1,000 something days. I mean, he's approaching, that Hulk Hogan type of championship run where he was just champion forever. So, but there's some good stories though. There's some good stories, and they have a lot of talent there. So it's gonna be interesting to see how this era plays out for them. All right, I want to get to some gaming conversation here. I did download. For those who don't know, I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3. I'm like probably hitting that 400-hour mark between 3 playthroughs. But I actually, be surprised at your logic, I actually put down Baldur's Gate 3, picked up Persona 3 Reload. Hey, I got it for free, by the way. And I also picked up Grandblue Fantasy Relink. So this weekend I'll be playing both those games, and it was nice. I actually did fire up Persona 3 Reload today. I got it for PC. And it's funny, like I had it running at 120 FPS. I'm like, this is a little bit overkill for this game. but the remaster or remake is actually pretty good. I actually like it. I like the Persona games anyway, but from what I played so far, I think it's a pretty good remake. Some of the camera, the way the camera operates in the games, I got to get a little bit used to it, only because I'm coming up Baldur's Gate 3. Like there's limitations with how the camera pans. Like you don't get the full 360 rotation of the camera at times. Sometimes it moves very much like a side scroller. So I had to get used to that. But there are certain parts of the game where you can you have that full range of motion, or the camera spins 360 degrees. So, but so far, I've only played about 45 minutes of it, or probably about an hour actually. And if you like Persona, I would suspect you'll like this iteration of Persona if you haven't played Persona 3. There's some dark undertones already there from the get-go to kind of set the tone and prepare you for what's happening. And I'm looking forward to playing more of it, and then getting to Grandblue Fantasy Relink, which I did play the demo and I actually enjoyed quite a bit. So that's what I'll be playing this weekend. What about you, Logic? Like, what are you going to be focusing on this weekend in terms of games?
So I'm in a bit of a struggle right now. So I have been trying to remember actually what I was playing before this last week. So I on the Xbox. So coming off the last episode of E2KG, I had been going back and revisiting, not kind of revisiting, but kind of spending more time with Forza Motorsport on the Xbox Series X. I had been playing it when I had played it before. I'd been playing it on PC, and I went back and started playing it on the Series X, and really spent like a few days with it, so a longer amount of time than I had before. And kind of started, picking some things out. I wrote up a pretty lengthy post on Twitter about kind of my thoughts on it after going back to it. And then I hit the flip and wanted to spend some time playing some handheld gaming. And so I had been waiting for a long time to pick up Titan's Quest, which is an old PC game which had been ported to the Nintendo Switch, which I had on my list for a very long time. It's very much kind of like a Diablo type game, but set in Greek mythology. And I think in December I tried to order a physical copy, and it hadn't shown up, and I processed it for a refund and blah blah blah. So finally this week I was like, screw it, I'll just get the digital copy. So I've been playing that, and I mentioned to you I'd wanted to go back and play Divinity Original Sin 2 as well. Which is Larian Studios' game before Baldur's Gate 3, and had a really good time playing that too. So I'm gonna turn the corner and flip into getting back to Call of Duty Modern Warfare Season 1 this weekend, since Season 2 is about to kick off next week. But the struggle I'm in right now is I see you guys playing these new games, and I'm hitting up Open Critic, and I'm like, I got Lost Crown last month and The Last of Us Part 2. I need to go back to those, but now I'm like FOMOing about, because you and I talked about, that I had mentioned when we were talking about Pal World, and I was like, hey, January is a pretty light month. There's like 12 releases ish in that order of magnitude, but you turn the corner into February and it like triples. So now I'm hearing you guys playing these new games, and I'm like, man, maybe I should go grab something, pick something up. I know I've wound up skipping Tekken, and I should probably grab that. But yeah, I don't know. I'll try and keep the faith and stick to what I'm doing, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes when you all these new releases come out, and then you hear the excitement of people who are playing some of these games. It's hard to say, oh, I'm gonna hold off, and work on something else. But what about Suicide Squad? Because that's out today. Is that something you might tackle, or is that not something you might be interested in playing?
Nope. It's sizing up like something that I will probably stay off of until probably it hits a subscription service. Just doesn't. I mean, and look, we've had this discussion. We there's this narrative that runs around that says, don't listen to reviews, don't let anybody else tell you what to play. I don't let other people tell me what to play. I do try and manage my time, and I'm like, if a game isn't hitting a certain threshold for me, I have my own metrics. I'm like, that's not a science experiment I want to do. Even if I keep myself to the science experiment of trying to play every game that's an 80 or above or a 90 or above on Metacritic, that still gives me more games than I can, complete in a year. So no, right now I'm staying out of that pool. Part of one of my nits too, in particular, is, I am a big comic book fan. And so, I suffer from one of those things where like, if the game like strays way far right off of, any of my particular things that, that I hold dear or that I don't like in a comic book thing, then it doesn't grab me as well as it might somebody who doesn't have like those peculiarities. So, and you and I talked about it. Like, it's, to me, I don't like the notion of the anti-hero. I just don't really particularly buy it. In fictional stories, people are good or bad, period. You don't need to try and humanize somebody. I think I mentioned on the show, you don't need to try and make me feel sorry for Thanos. Like, he's the bad guy. Like, I'm not going to feel bad for him. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Get out of my face with that. So, so yeah, I mean, this game always always had an uphill. What's that?
Thanos has feelings too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, this game always had an uphill battle because, from market uptake, because as much as there's zeitgeist that goes around that says people like, a Hannibal or a Dexter or, things like that. The truth of the matter is, from a commerciality perspective, when you look at market uptake, games, movies, things that are about the bad guy in general tend not to sell as well. So, I mean, this game was going to struggle. There's lots of steps away that it's taken from the Rocksteady, formula or the things that they did well. So no, it's nothing I need to jump into the pool in, here, right at launch. It's something that I can definitely kind of wait to ever get around to.
Yeah. Some of the reviews are trickling in now. There's about 18 reviews on Metacritic, and Suicide Squad is currently sitting at a 61 right now. IGN, actually one of the larger review sites, gave it a 50. I'm not really surprised by that given their preview. VGC gave it an 80, or 4 out of 5 stars. So, but it's interesting. Like, I've been reading some of the feedback on Twitter from people who are playing it. It does sound like there are people out there that are enjoying it, that enjoy the campaign piece. I know Slomo talked about it a little bit last night on DPS, and a little bit about the game on BRAP Wednesday night. And it sounded, it based on what Slomo was saying, it sounds like the campaign piece is fun. Like, people are having fun with that. But then after you finish the campaign piece, like, the game just kind of falls off a cliff, which is kind of one of my complaints that I had with the Avengers game when that came out. But it's going to be interesting to see where this game kind of settles in, and, where, because again, like there's more reviews coming in. I'm seeing some people saying they're enjoying it. There's some repetitiveness to the game, but I've seen some people saying despite that, they're still having fun with it. So it's going to be interesting to see where this game lands. But I wonder too, Logic, is if this is going to be a game, like if there's any lessons learned from Gotham Knights, like I wonder if this game ends up, selling well. Because that's kind of what happened with Gotham Knights. It did well, despite.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it does. I mean, and WB has every right to, thumb their nose right in people's face who claim that their games are going to fail. Because just like you said, Gotham Knights 17th best-selling game in the U.S. In 2023, 2022. Do I have my years mixed up? My years on BRAP. I think 2022, right?
Let me see here. When did that game release?
Gotham Knights was the year before. I'm losing track of how long I've been on this show.
How long have you been on the show?
I think it was 2022, right?
Yeah, October 21st. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry, chat. But yeah, and that's a great example of strong license, a game that, people are thirsty for. Like I've always commented, I was just saying now, big comic book fan. Like for me in comic books, like to be quite honest, the more interesting stories to me are around the Bat family, than Batman himself. I cannot remember the name of it, but when the New 52 came around, there was and one of the things they did as part of the New 52 was there were some comics that went weekly, and so that was part of the trope, right, of the advertising bit of it being the New 52 is that there were these comics that were coming out, 52 times a year, and there was one, but we're really centered around the Bat family and kind of the way it went each week. It kind of paired up different members of the team, and they were off, doing their own thing outside of Gotham City. And so you got to see, pairs are like a triple. So you got to see there was one arc that was like Batgirl. Was it Batgirl, Jason Todd, and I think Nightwing, and and both there was a big conversation of how it came out that like out of all of them, Batman had the most trust and confidence in Batgirl. So it dropped little things. So I mean, I love like the concept of of Gotham Knights. The game sounded so awesome to me. I'm sure it did to lots of other people, and so it got a huge amount of commercial uptake. And Suicide Squad has gotten more popular, but Suicide Squad is one where, I mean, and some other people in the chat can let me know how they feel. I feel like DC WB, they've been pushing that noodle uphill for the last half decade or so, and they've gotten close to getting scratching an itch, but they just haven't nailed it. Like, people weren't happy with the Suicide Squad the rendition of the Suicide Squad on Arrow. I don't think that they were super happy. I think the movie cut a little bit closer to like a big thing about the Suicide Squad is they have to be expendable. You have to let people die because that is the virtue of the story of the Suicide Squad. It was a place in DC Comics where they would kill people off. And without that threat to the existence of people who are on the team, then it with the comic book faithful, it just doesn't stick the landing. And that was a problem with on Arrow. They were very reluctant to ever really kill any of those characters off. But I think the movie has made good on a little bit of that. I think some of the spin-offs, people like Peacekeeper, have been, but this game feels like it's not. They've picked 4 of the most popular members of the Suicide Squad, who clearly, I assume, they're not going to set up to really be expendable in the game. So I don't know. Suicide Squad just seems to be a tough thing that DC and WB have been trying to get their hands around of what fans want.
Yeah, you're right. I think they've kind of been close, like teetering on that edge of kind of like you said, scratching that itch, but just kind of haven't crossed the finish line.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, I see some commentary in the live chat right now about Rockstar, Rocksteady. Rocksteady's dead. Paul Tassi put out an article saying he thinks this is probably Rocksteady's last PvE game. And I've heard that narrative too, that others are concerned that this game doesn't do well. That what does that mean for Rocksteady? Yeah, look, I as a fan of their previous games, the Batman games, I don't want to see them to go away. I hope that's not the case if this game doesn't do well. And I hope they I'm not so sure they need to do another superhero game. And maybe they do. Maybe they go back to, and maybe they do another Batman. I don't know, but I don't want to see them exit stage left and no longer be part of the conversation. And I hope that doesn't happen here because maybe this game doesn't hit certain performance goals that WB set, and there's we've seen enough layoffs in the industry, right? Hopefully that doesn't happen either. But what do you think, Logic? Like, if this game doesn't pan out per se, like to sell well, what do you think might happen to Rocksteady? And I understand it's speculation here, but what do you think? Because Rocksteady is a fan favorite. I think a lot of people who have played the Batman games are like, oh, we love Rocksteady. I think some are disappointed by by them doing a live service type game as opposed to doing another campaign focused experience. So
go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, here we're down saying I love the Arkhamverse. So I'm not one of those. I'm not going to say that it's the end. I've seen some people say, "Oh, this game fails or done," but I see B Money. What's up, B Money? B Money says they should have made a Teen Titans or Justice League game, but
Teen Titans would have been dope.
That would have been cool. Yeah, Justice League would have been cool. But what and I hate speculating, but B Money saying the studio leads are already gone. So B, do they leave? Do they leave prior? Like, do they just leave after the game release?
Yeah, there was a bit of a Zampella, and I forget Zampella's partner's name, but you remember when Zampella and his partner got marched out of the Activision building by the jackbooted. What's the term they used? Black jackbooted thugs, or I can't remember, but and then they went off and started Respawn. So there was a little bit of kind of that. I mean, they weren't marched out of the HQ, but
basically Rocksteady, not that was you talking about Zampella was with oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There was a situation similar to what happened with Infinity Ward. So the two main leads of Rocksteady left in the run up of this game. And the speculation is because they were kind of fed up with what was kind of being jammed down Rocksteady's throat. And I can't remember what podcast it was that I was listening to, but they were speculating that they wonder if in the wake of this you'll see a large defection of the staff there to go work for the new studio that those two have started, right? And then you kind of have again that kind of Respawn effect. I mean, my personal feeling of this is I've talked, I think several times, I'm sure I've mentioned it on the show that through the late 2010s, right, there were these studios that hit these large speed bumps, right? The 3Bs and a C: Bethesda, BioWare, Blizzard, CDPR. Now after the Redfall debacle, I've now added Arcane to that. And quite honestly, when I started talking about this group of four, quite honestly, over the years, I never thought that I would be adding more studios right to this bucket. But these are studios who have been considered, have risen to become considered some of the marquee studios, right? But then they hit this large perturbance in the force, right? And they lose their mojo, right? They lose their step. Bethesda did that with Fallout 76. They have rallied in some ways. They have rallied and come back, because if you go look at the Steam reviews of Fallout 76, you go look at, there was something else that they have that they've done there's like a big comeback. But at least Fallout 76 is an incredibly well-regarded game on Steam. So they have pulled that game back from the brink. I think they salvaged a lot of their reputation. I think that reputation has gotten a skosh tarnished, whether you think it's fair or not, by Starfield. BioWare, right? Big misstep with Andromeda. A lot of loss of faith in the studio. But then also Anthem, right? And so same thing, right? A studio that kind of needs to prove that it's gotten its mojo back. Blizzard, big misstep with the effort to do the Warcraft remake. And then lots of missteps outside of that franchise, right? With Overwatch and other things. Loss of faith in the studio. They stuck the landing with Diablo 4, which is something that in my mind they really was really essential for them to do. CDPR obviously had Cyberpunk, and they have, through time, sheer will, putting shoulder to grindstone, they have pulled that back. Arcane, right, has, whether or not it's Austin or Leon, whatever. I think overall, at the end of the day, there's a loss of confidence in that studio, in particular now, partially because they're underneath the Microsoft umbrella. And so, the fact that they're pivoting that team already to a new game, right, I think is a good thing for them, and they need to stick the landing the next time around. I don't, despite what's going on with Suicide Squad, I personally, right, I have not added in my head, right, in this theoretical like model, I haven't added Rocksteady to this group, because I feel like the situation there is a little different. I never felt that they were comfortable doing what they were doing. I've just always felt, and again, this is entirely subjective. But I always felt like whether it was by choice or management pushing it down their throat or whatever, I always felt that they were, intentionally, deliberately, consciously, again, not necessarily of their own choice, maybe of management's choice, but like moving down a track that was not their preferred modality, right? I think the simple matter of this is what do they do next? Do they get back to the thing? I think personally, the big thing for that studio, because remember how this was all set up, right? They finished up Arkham, and we went for years not knowing what they were doing. And then on top of that, then we find out it's this. So I think there was a bit of a double trip in that, and that it was just so long that they were so secretive about what was going on. And then when it came out, it was like something that like most people didn't want. So I think the big thing for them is I personally think that they in the WB, they need to telegraph, right, whatever the pivot, whatever the heel turn is, right, out of this thing. They need to let people know. They need to let their fans know what they're working on. Where I think they could also make a big misstep, again, between them, PR, WB, is I know what they've done. I know what they've set up. I don't think this is a situation where people want to hear, hey, we're going to make the game better over time, and we're focusing the staff, right, on investing even more into Suicide Squad, right? I mean, I really hope that they pull that thing down to a skeleton crew that's the bare minimum that they need to roll out, right, this DLC plan, or that they staff up another team or whatever they need to do. But I think to restore faith in them, there needs to be a telegraphing that they're doing something else besides this. If this is all Rocksteady is going to be on, is cranking out DLC for this thing over the years, even if they turn it around, then I think you're going to have a huge loss of faith from people who were fans of their Arkham content, who will just go, obviously find something else to do, but also just their name won't be circulated in the same circles, right, of the great studios.
Yeah, that's a great point, Logic. And they'll end up in the conversation, the same conversation that we were having about BioWare after Anthem. And you bring up a great point about like people leaving, like the studio heads leaving, and starting new studios. I mean, that's you talk about BioWare. I mean, talk about BioWare is not the BioWare that you and I knew, years ago. Anthem came out, and that did terrible, and people left. And I'm just wondering if this game just tanks, doesn't do well, and I hope it does. Someone in the live chat said, "Have you seen the user reviews?" I've not seen the user reviews, but if it does, I would imagine that you're going to have more talent leaving, especially if this was a project that was kind of shoved down their throats by WB. Like, hey, we want to cash in on the superhero license. We feel like we can make some money here. We want you guys to work on this game. We don't want you to do another Batman game or another. Maybe another DC single player type game. I know there were some people that speculated that they were going to work on like a Spider-Man game, but I mean that was never confirmed. But there's just that was a rumor that was going around for quite some time, but yeah, I would imagine that if this thing doesn't work out, much like we saw BioWare, you'll see an exodus of talent leaving, and they'll go maybe work at some of these other studios that have been open with Rocksteady employees. We've seen that with BioWare. And then unfortunately, like you said, Logic, they probably become part of that conversation of, hey, remember when Rocksteady was good? Kind of like we have with BioWare. I know BioWare is bringing Mass Effect back, but I feel like Mass Effect's kind of like a last ditch effort for that particular studio. Like that game's got a hit. But it's just gonna be to me. I'm just curious to see, or I'm interested to see how this is all going to play out. Obviously, I want the game to be successful because I'm a fan of Rocksteady. Like I love the Batman games. I thought, I was hoping they'd either do another Batman or maybe they do another like single player campaign with another DC character. But that may not happen.
Well, and somebody brings up a good point, as somebody's, because what was it? What was you said? The person said, like, have you seen the user reviews?
The user reviews, yeah.
My first response to that is, well, there's only one place that there are any user reviews that are at all worth a damn. So I was about to push back and say, Steam. First of all, like, user reviews outside of Steam are nothing to pay attention to. But surprisingly enough, we do have some validity in that. The Steam user reviews are very positive. Now, right now, that's only out of 738 people who have reviewed it. So that's a pretty small number. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But yeah, it's definitely a valid thing. And I frequently said, you look at these games, they come out, they don't review well. Mm-hmm. But I constantly go back and check out the Steam user reviews, and we'll onboard with a game, that's got good user reviews despite whatever Metacritic scores or whatever. That's very valid. And so yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. I think Pixel Slap mentioned, like, reputation is not the metric these days. It's a different world. I'm not sure if this is the way you intended it, but I guess what I will say is, unfortunately, so there's two different ways these discussions go, and people have heard me say it on the show, and I will always say it. I'm never going to align with those review scores don't count, but these review scores are valid, right? Which is typically oriented around whatever platform, right, is your preferred platform and the one you are trying to support. Halo Infinite scores are invalid, but Returnal scores are okay. However, what I will say is, despite the way that I feel that way about the way a lot of people talk about review scores, what I will say is I will concur with that. We are in a world where there's unfortunately just not a definitive rubric, right, between review scores, user review scores, and sales. And you kind of do have to look at them case by case. You just need to support it with some rational thought that doesn't fail my smell test of, are you console warring and are you a fanboy? Mm-hmm. Starfield has rough edges. It has bad implementations. It has problems. Its user review scores on Steam, at least last time I checked, are not great. I'm going to check again. But they're mostly negative recent review scores and mixed overall. Game has sold incredibly well. It's charted on NPD more consecutive months in a row than I had anticipated. Mm-hmm. It charted NPD for the year. But that's one where in my opinion, at least my perspective is I take a measured take at it. I say, this is a game that did not didn't stick the landing from a critical perspective, but it sold incredibly well. And so where I land on, is it a good game or not, right, is not solely driven by sales numbers, in that case. So Suicide Squad is one to definitely keep an eye on. I don't know how, if the game sells really well, has good Steam user review scores, but is kind of critically panned elsewhere. Again, you need to make your own decision on where you come down on your own assessment of, like, market uptake. In my mind, that equates to a game that has a big fan following, but maybe isn't, a super well designed game, but still, because of the license and other factors, turns out well from a commerciality standpoint.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering too. Like, based on the license, the Suicide Squad, the movies and everything, like, this game may like, again, like, I go back to Gotham Knights, it may be something that surprises us, where we look back at this, we're like, oh, wait a minute, like, the reviews were terrible, but this game sold 5 million copies. Who would have thought? Because you're right, there's sometimes a disconnect between the review scores and how a game does in retail.
Yeah, I would love to say I'm glad that person made that comment in chat, whoever it was, because now Suicide Squad's kind of back on my radar, at least, as far as me, keeping an eye on kind of how the rest of the Steam community kind of views it.
And I'm not saying that like the game's going to get a lot of sales from this one thing, but there is a part of me that's interested in buying this game because I grew up reading comics, so anything that's comic book related, I'm going to gravitate towards. So there's that. But part of me is kind of like, you know what? I kind of want to try it out, see what it's like, because the one thing that I have, again, that I've heard, and I think Slobo mentioned this on Wednesdays, that the campaign part is fun, and maybe that's something I try out. And so that curiosity, and I've seen other people say, oh, I took the plunge about Suicide Squad. I want to see what this is about. And again, I'm not saying that's going to drive like 1 million sales of the game for Rocksteady WB, but I think there could be more people out there maybe that look at this and say, wait, I'm kind of curious to see if this game's really that bad. Or people that are comic book fans may say, you know what, I want to play this game. I don't care what the review scores are. I love the Suicide Squad. I want to play as Deadshot. I want to play these characters.
Well, and I don't know. For me, that's where I feel like again, every consumer is going to be different. For me, I turn my eye of looking at that as a cautionary tale, right? Where Gotham Knights, you and I were talking earlier this week. Look, we have data that has come back from surveys that tells us at the end of the day, most gamers by and large square down on genre. And what that means is that you have lots of people that play bad games because they are in genres that they like. And similar as we mentioned, right, for licenses and IP. So what I will say is that I've listened to a few people who have said the same things about Avengers and Suicide Squad, that when you get into the live service aspects of the game, that the game really loses the mission. So they've taken both of those games and looked at them in the regard of separating the live service stuff from the core campaign. And when I hear people making those comments, the people who are up on the campaign for Avengers, I've heard them concurrently down on the campaign for Suicide Squad. So I'm kind of listening to that too and saying, well, it seems like for a person who is of that mindset that Avengers was fine until you hit live service, they didn't feel as positively about Suicide Squad. But it is what it is. The game's gonna do however well it does. It's got the scores that it's got. It doesn't have a horrible meta score. It's at a 72 right now, so that's not a bad score.
Is it a 72?
Yeah, it's at a 72.
Why am I seeing 61 from Suicide Squad?
For Metascore?
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, wait, you know what? That's my fault. Never mind what I said. Because I hit Suicide Squad Metascore. I hit Suicide Squad Metascore. It took me to the movie.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised seeing this thing land around like a 65, 68 Metacritic.
Yeah, you're right. It is a 61. I'm wondering.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. So of course it's a 61 now based on 20 reviews for the PlayStation 5 version. So it'll be interesting to see when the Xbox and PC scores hit.
Yeah.
By the way, and I've said it on the show before, but in case people haven't heard it, this facelift of Metacritic is ass. This website is completely and entirely useless. Unless
I don't like it either.
Unless you're going to do like what I just did, which is like Google for like game Metascore, and it takes you directly to the page. But like going to the front page and using it for discovery like I used to do is completely.
It's all tiles now.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so you're right. I don't like it.
I hate it. I use OpenCritic now.
Yeah. No. I hear you, man. I hear you. Actually, I want to see these games here on Metacritic.
Like it just, I'm sitting here now. I'm sitting here getting angry at like you, like you go to the front page, right? You go to the front page, and then you hit see all, right? Which is normally the way I've always used Metacritic, right? You go to the see all page, you get thumbnails that are so small and not like you can't tell what the hell game it is, and the name of the game isn't even fully spelled out. You get like the first 10 letters, and then it says ...
It's abbreviated, and then you got to slide over to see the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to force you to click, right? Because their metrics are driven by clicks. They're trying to force you to click to go to the next porpoise level down to actually see what the hell game it is. And I'm like, we're not doing that. I'm not playing that game.
Well, I didn't see Blaze Blue Entropy Effect. It's at 86 Metacritic. Huh. It's a game that, all right. We'll get back to Metacritic here in a little bit as we talk about games 2024. But yeah, I don't disagree with you, Hamp. I don't care for the new layout. All right, we did. There was an article by The Verge about Hi-Fi. So Hi-Fi Rush is in use again. At this point, I know we've talked a lot about it, and I'm just like, you know what? Like, it's gonna happen. It just is what it is. People are upset. People are angry. I saw some people raging at Phil Spencer and things like that. I just think that's foolishness. But according to The Verge and some other sites, there was the Hi-Fi Rush per a data mine. Some data miners have found some T-shirt files, including the game. With the latest update saying "I'm here, baby" in PlayStation Blue, and "Rock Out Anywhere" in Nintendo Switch Red. So, and then shadow dropped in Xbox Green. So these are the T-shirts they're saying. So the T-shirts shadow drop Xbox Green. That's obviously the game was shadow dropped on the Xbox. And then "I'm here, baby" so PlayStation, and then "Rock Out Anywhere" Nintendo Switch. Anywhere being you can carry the Switch anywhere you want to play the game. But and so Tom Warren's like, look, this thing's happening. And people are upset, and I this thing with Xbox is kind of interesting. At the end of the day, I feel like if you enjoy the ecosystem, does it really matter if the games go elsewhere? Like, I understand if you're having a conversation about the impacts to the business, like, okay, what does this mean for Microsoft if they start putting more third-party content everywhere? Like, what does that mean for the Xbox hardware? What does that mean? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, your comment that you just mentioned is So the problem where we're not seeing behavior that kind of trues up to that perspective is, in my personal opinion, lots of that fan base have never been people who enjoyed the ecosystem. People who enjoy the ecosystem are playing the games on both Xbox and on PC. And maybe are playing Xbox Cloud Gaming on their mobile device.
So you're saying I'm more Xbox. BRAP is more Xbox than some of these diehard Xbox fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reactions we're seeing are from people who play on the console, who've been waving the flag, saying, more games everywhere for everyone. And this is what I've always said: is I'm like, okay, but do you play those games anywhere else besides the Xbox? Like, if you're in love with the console, this is what I've been saying for so long. If you're in love with the console, then you should be concerned. I would think that you would be concerned about what's happening on the console. Because, again, when you go back to the lessons learned of all the things that I've been through, I know that the pattern of past behavior is that when Microsoft takes its eye off the ball of the hardware and it starts considering the hardware non-essential, then those businesses have had a tendency to go entirely software-based. And I've lived through that, and I've seen that before, right? This isn't like just speculation, right? This is all of the years of Microsoft products that I've fallen in love with.
Paul's Gaming mentioned Zune, Windows Phone. I mean, those are great examples.
Yeah. And I love the Zune. I loved Windows Phone. I mean, I had a half dozen, 8 different Windows phones. I love the I can't remember the name of it, but the Lumia with like the big camera on the back that was some like a 200 megapixel camera or something like that. Back in the days where there were no 200 megapixel cameras. Yeah. Right. And if people who have that phone, like that phone's camera still keeps pace with a lot of phone cameras. Like, so I've never understood the diehard console people who rah-rahed and pom-pommed the peanut buttering of IPs around to Nintendo Switch and the cloud, and we're like, oh yeah, this is great, more games for more people. I'm like, okay, yes, if you're a person who plays those games in all those places, but if you're a person who plays games on console, you're just seeing yourself become a smaller and smaller and smaller percentage of the demographic until you hit a point where you're no longer relevant. And you hit a point where you and I were talking earlier this week. I'm like, Amy Hood doesn't give people a pass. Like if Amy Hood sees money going in a direction,
she wants her money back.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. If Amy Hood sees money going in a direction, she's going to hold people accountable. That's not doing anything, right? When that money's not doing anything. And it's like, okay, once you build the business up to this point where it's sustainable on all these other platforms, right? Does it make sense to keep throwing money at the hardware if the hardware is not doing anything for you? Mm-hmm. And again, this isn't me disparaging the hardware. I have an Xbox Series X. I just mentioned I was playing Forza Motorsport.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed. I spend time in lots of different operating systems, right? iOS, Android, Windows, Linux, Mac OS X. Like, and at the end of the day, I spend. I preferentially spend a lot of my time in Windows. I tend to prefer the Xbox operating system as a derivative of Windows, right? But like I said, what I can see, and as I know from past experience, that percentage in the necessary focus that goes along with it, the necessary investment that goes along with it, it's not a positive trend in expecting it to continue to be supported robustly, right, when it dwindles in percentage in comparison to the rest of the business base.
Yeah. And I know that, it's just always interesting to me when I see people upset, and these are the same people that said, "Oh, more games everywhere, it's great," and then when they start reading, when they start seeing that's actually really happening, then they're like, "Oh, Phil, like you're terrible. Like, why are you doing this? We've been loyal customers," and it's like, well, they've been telling you for months now, I would argue years, the direction they're going, and again, at the end of the day, if you enjoy the ecosystem, I think that's all that matters. Like, look, if PlayStation decided to bring their games day and date on PC, frankly, I wouldn't be mad. I'd be like, hey, great. I'm getting rid of my PlayStation 5 console. I'm doubling down even more on PC because I'm going to get those PlayStation games on PC. But it's an ecosystem now. It's not about just playing on the hardware, the console anymore. It's not console centric anymore.
Well, and not now. It's been an ecosystem for an incredibly long time.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah. So some of the, I am hearing that I was listening to, not listening to, but Idle Sloth put out a tweet today. When Jetscore was talking about that Microsoft is greenlit new hardware. I don't think they're exiting hardware anytime soon. I think they're gonna. We've talked about this. I think you and I both agree they're gonna continue making hardware for that small group of 40, 50 million people that will buy the hardware. I don't think they're going to exit the hardware business anytime soon. But it begs the question though too. If the console, the hardware doesn't perform, that could be a conversation where Amy Hood's like, wait a minute, guys, like is the juice? Is it worth the squeeze for us to continue to make hardware? I'm not saying they're having that conversation right now. I'm just saying, like, based on how the hardware is performing now, we know that per the financials, and I got to get Falky on, by the way, so we can discuss the quarterly financials that were just released. But Amy Hood did mention that they expect, I believe it was negative growth again on Xbox hardware, which, Logic, that's been consistent for the last year? Is that kind of what they've been seeing, just negative growth?
There's an inflection point. I pulled this together in a Twitter post, I think at near the end of last year. I mean, it's been in decline since. I mean, if you go back over the 3 years and you look at their financial reports, you can see the timeline where each quarter they were talking about how positive returns in the, I can't remember what that third operating reporting segment is called, but like consumer electronics or consumer products or whatever, how it was gaming was contributory. But then I want to say it was 2022, late 2022, they stopped saying that, and then they started attributing negative growth in that segment to gaming. So if you look at it over a 3-year time period, there's definitely a cycle where there's definitely a point, a chronology where you can see And I believe that was concurrent with them starting to see negative growth in comparison to hardware sales. But definitely, for the majority of 2023.
Yeah, and and I've argued like if you're making first party exclusives and you rely on hardware to sell those, to sell copies of those exclusives, but then you're not selling enough hardware. I mean, I would imagine that at some point you start having conversations. Okay, well, we're spending X amount of dollars to make first party exclusives, but we're not selling enough hardware to make that make sense for us. So what do we do? And this is what I've been trying to convey on this podcast for, I feel like, ever now. It's like if the math isn't working out, at some point you pivot and you try to figure out how to make it work out. And that's either you leave or you change your business model, and which is what they've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, since people get so they fly up into the ceiling if you ever mention about the hardware business going away. I mean, what I think we'll see for a period of time is, again, something that looks like their Surface business, right? Something that's kind of a boutique piece of hardware that as you mentioned, sells to that like rigidly loyal fan base.
Yeah.
That kind of is the foundation, right, in the life's blood of the brand.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of investment and money, right? Again, we go back and we talk about the Xbox hybrid compute gaming platform.
Yeah.
Which by the way, I talked about before Phil came out and publicly mentioned it, right? And I said that based on their strategic notions, right, was the type of thing they would need to build.
I gotta figure out how to incorporate like intro music. So like, when you, like for the like a WWE type intro, like for the architect, and like have like a like the like the wrestlers have the what is it, the oh my god, the pyro and the like their own like intro and like the screen behind them, with their name flashing. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and I mean, I talked about this when he talked about it before he even started doing the Redfall mea culpa, right? That look, the strategic intention to build a community of gamers who play on multiple platforms, of which the console is only one, right? Combined with the things he and Satya have been saying for years about wanting to get to the wider addressable market of the billions of gamers who can't afford to buy a console or don't want to buy a console, and wanting to take that off the table as the price of entry. And then combined with the statements he made before the Redfall mea culpa, which is that he wanted those people to be able to play in a community of gamers where they were at parity. Mixing that with those things being said at a time when they were trying to make the Activision acquisition, and the time where they were making all of these deals for Call of Duty, what I said at the time, again, before the leaks fell, is I said, in order to have something that is like a Call of Duty played as a community of gamers on multiple platforms where people are at parity, where the guy playing on the PC with a 4090, right, and a Ryzen 7950X, right, doesn't make the person playing in the cloud feel like a third-class citizen, that is an inherently different way from a technology and a software perspective than we build video games today. The manner in which bullet arbitration and strike timing needs to be handled must be inherently different. The system has to have resilience and robustness in a manner that helps and balances latency and lag in a way that it does not compensate in sufficient manner for that type of parity today. Games, engines, underlying technology, connectivity, netcode, all of that has to be redone because it has to be vastly different than the way games are built today. And so the only way you get to that is you re-engineer at the primitive level the way that foundational code is assembled, and when you put it on something where it can be orchestrated, and that's what we see from the leak in terms of the Xbox hybrid compute gaming platform, right? And we also see that being supported by the notion of the hardware people who were pushing for an x64 based, right, Xbox, right? Nobody. Well, I mean, I guess maybe you might argue Apple with the iPhone, but in general, nobody's talking about building an X64 platform so they can get you 4K 120 with ray tracing.
No,
right?
No, they're not. No.
So, I mean, that seems to be a likely way that they would have to head, just based on, the conclusion you would draw based on the technologies that we have today. And I'm not going to say that that's inherently wrong, but what that means is, again, you're talking about the citizenship of that type of nation, and the people that are of the console demographic are not the majority, right? They're a minority. And again, maybe you're the minority that's kind of like the Microsoft Surface, right? Which was a demographic that got lots of nice things and got attended to. I had a Surface. I had a Surface Duo. I mean, they're nice pieces of hardware, but at the end of the day, Windows, lots of the applications and things like that weren't really inherently being made for the Surface, right? They were being made based on the stakeholder inputs of all of their other laptop vendors who sell way more devices, right, than the Surface ever did. Yeah.
And I understand, like, consumers wanting to feel special, important. We've talked about that on the show quite a bit too, and in conversation off air. But because of the direction they're going, that's just not going to be the case anymore. And what I would say to consumers is, if that's something that's that you value, hey, I want to have something other people can't have. I mean, like we always talk about, you have a choice to make as a consumer. We do this with other consumer products, where when a consumer product isn't doing what we want it to do, or isn't providing the value that we want from it, we go elsewhere. And so there's other options out there. But outside of that, I mean, if you enjoy the ecosystem, I don't think there's much to complain about. I mean, I'm actually, and because of the developer direct that they had last month, I'm actually excited about the ecosystem, at least the potential of the ecosystem. If they can, like, I tweeted Aaron, like, hey, Aaron, this is great. Like, you guys got me back on Game Pass. If you guys can continue this cadence of releases, that's actually a cool thing to be able to play these games on my PC. If I had an Xbox, I could do that, but I don't. I have tried xCloud. I've actually done it on my phone a couple of times. It hasn't really worked well. But if it improved, it might be something that I might utilize to play other games. So, for me, the biggest thing with them is just that consistency of releasing content that's of interest to me. Again, everyone likes different types of games. I know we all joke around, call me AAA BRAP. But at least this year, and like I said to you, Hamp, I love what they showed us at the Direct, like that roadmap of, hey, this is what you're going to play in 2024. I'm like, oh, okay, this is good. Like that's what I want to see from them moving forward. Whether or not that happens, who knows? But I'd like to see that moving forward from the developer directs. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think that necessarily constitutes a roadmap, but.
Well, I
have a certain a certain number of games, a certain volume of games, and a certain distance into the future that something has to be laid out before I apply the label roadmap.
Yeah, I'm using that term loosely.
Yes, and in a way, unfortunately, I think many gamers ready to apply the term today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the idea of knowing, like, hey, you know what? We have this show in January, and then here's what we have for the rest of the year. I'm okay with that. Like, I actually prefer that than okay, like, here's a trailer for something that's coming out 2, 3, 4 years.
Well, what I've been commenting on, what people don't understand, I think maybe because we have a bunch of youngs in the like that thing of like doing a show earlier in the year and laying out what was coming for the entirety of the year.
Great segue.
That's a recent change. We didn't really get anything like that until the Nintendo Switch came along. Yeah. Right? Before the Nintendo Switch, it was vastly aligned around the notion of E3 would come along and you would be told what you would be playing for the remainder of that year. You might have another, press release, interview, something that would tell you then what the wraparound on the beginning of next year, or maybe you would get dribs and drabs of that out of PAX.
Yeah.
But by and large, now, yes, it's neat that we get, quite frankly, it's neat what the PlayStation State of Play did, right? Where it came out in January, which I think, I could be mistaken, but generally, historically, I think they're a little bit later in the year than that. They're like February-ish, maybe. But but they came out and laid a lot of things out. Again, I don't know if they personally meet people's metrics of. I think you and I have been talking. I think people complain about not knowing enough, and I'm like, okay, well what's the number, right? Because I'm absolutely certain that whether I tell you 1 game in advance that's coming, 2 games in advance, 5, 7, 10, 12, you're always going to complain about not knowing enough, right? So put a number on it so that when they come under that number, then you can say quantifiably, yeah, this isn't doing what I want, right? Otherwise, I don't want to hear about your belly aching just for the sake of belly aching. So, I mean, it's neat that we live in this era now where things get laid out like at the beginning of the year or for like a 12-month time frame or a longer period of time. But that's fairly new. In the past, things were, like I said, we knew from like summer through the end of the year at best, and then the rest of it was dribs and drabs. Yeah. You and I talked nostalgically today, like it's not like back in the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo time period that we were going, oh my God, where's the roadmap? What are they doing? They've got all these studios.
Oh man, Super Mario Brothers 2 is in trouble. No, I mean, we talked a lot about this. You're right. Like growing up, like we didn't have the E3 or state of plays. We had magazines, and what you saw in the magazine was kind of your roadmap. And you wouldn't know when you would see the new Zelda, the Adventure of Link, right? Nintendo Power. I think it was originally Nintendo Fan Club, then it was Nintendo Power. But you would see the new Zelda, Adventure of Link, and you would read that. Oh yeah, this looks. Oh yeah. And you wouldn't hear anything for like months about that game.
We would be waiting for a month after E3 happened to see any of the news about what had happened at E3. And again, yes, that's an old, antiquated perspective, and I get it. People feel like it's not applicable to today. But my point is, like, dude, back then we had no conscious idea of when a console generation was going to end. None whatsoever. We know right now. We know right now today, and we have for the last couple of generations. Yeah. We've had a pretty good fixation, right? Fixed point in time where we believe this console generation is going to end. And for these consoles, by large part because of the leaks and the hearings last year, we think that we have the actual rough dates, right, when these console generations are going to end. We're waiting to see if one of the Xbox or PlayStation jumps the gun by a year. Which, again, I predicted when the leaks came out that was going to happen. Of course, we're hearing rumblings of that now. But, God forbid I ever be right about anything. But, so all of these machinations that we have about, and all the complaining about, they need to be more transparent. If I knew how much a game cost, then I would have more empathy. Like, nobody gave a shit about your empathy 10 years ago. Like these companies are going to try and sell games. Like we get tons of information. You guys haven't finished your backlogs from last year, even for most of you, and you're complaining about not knowing the roadmap for, the console. And as you mentioned, acting like, oh my God, PlayStation down bad because like their consumers don't know what's coming like 2 years from now. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I'll say this. I know you said that's kind of an antiquated perspective, but the one constant, though, is that while we were waiting for those games, we were playing other games.
Very true.
And that hasn't changed. And I feel like people have forgotten that. And it's like I talked about Persona 3, and I talked about Grandblue Fantasy Relink, Suicide Squad out today, if that's your cup of tea. And there's other games that we talked about, the games that are coming. I think you mentioned there was like 12 releases this last month, and it's like for the month of February, it's like double that.
Yeah, I think triple. Yeah, I'll check that.
But this month of February, we're going to get Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We got Persona today. We got Grandblue Fantasy. We have Suicide Squad. I mean, those are 4 big games, and there's other games sprinkled in there that I haven't mentioned. And look, I understand. Like, I get people being excited and being fans of a first-party studio. I get that. What I don't understand is the sky is falling. They're in trouble. The game's in trouble. We need to start questioning leadership. That's the kind of stuff I don't co-sign on, because unless like, and I'll always use Sony here, because one of the things that came out of the State of Play, people were complaining there's no first party. And again, like, I understand, like, I came to this like, hey, you know what? If they show first party, that is going to be awesome. But they didn't. They showed other games that, despite them not being first party games, were games that I was interested in. But I also think people forget this too. I think people forget that while there might be games that were shown at the State of Play that might not be of interest to them, understand that there are other people who those games would be interesting for. You know, and that maybe, you know, I look at like Death Stranding 2 on the beach. I looked at Stellar Blade, Until Dawn, Rise of the Ronin. V Rising actually looked pretty cool. That's a PC game that's coming to PlayStation 5 now.
Well, if you remember,
yeah,
I know you and Mooch are old, and so maybe your memories don't hold as much traction. But if you remember,
you say me and Mooch are old?
Yeah, if you remember, you Mooch and I can't remember if the three of us got together, but that was the game that Mooch brought up last year or the year before.
V Rising?
Yeah. On PC.
On PC.
And I thought we all got together and played. I'm not sure, but I know I definitely went and downloaded it.
He was playing it though. He was playing it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but my point is like there's still content coming, and again, I understand like the excitement and wanting to see first party, but what I disagree with is the whipping out the jump into conclusions, Matt, and then saying that something's wrong at Sony first party, and Jim Ryan was fired, and them not showing first party stuff at the State of Play is proof of that. Like that's I just don't agree with that. And you know, these games, like we know these studios aren't just like sitting on their laurels and not working on anything. Not,
right. I mean, we should know that from the Insomniac leak. Like,
well, yeah, exactly.
People who have said there's no roadmap, that like even if you have the most bare grasp of any business, you should know that that's categorically untrue. You should know that there's planning that's in place because people can't staff, people can't figure out where they're recruiting from. They can't keep an eye on what technologies are emerging, what programming languages are coming into the zeitgeist. They can't tell what their pipeline is of people without orienting that around a plan and around a target, without making capital expenditures that sometimes you have to make 1 year, 2 year, 3 years in advance, right? Or start pipelining things, or start having conversations with AMD about what they're building. Like, obviously, clearly, you would conceive that they're already working in the R&D pipeline for what the next thing is, right? And that drives and begets derivatives that fall out of that notion of what those targets are. So again, you should know that they have some semblance of a roadmap. It's just what you're burnt about is that they haven't shared it with you. And then that's a different conversation about whether or not you feel that they're obligated to. If you feel that they're obligated to, my ultimatum that I constantly throw at people, which causes them to all back up, right, and suddenly lay down their swords, is, okay, if you've lost confidence and you think they need to question leadership, then feel free to go right down to GameStop and trade in your PlayStation 5. You're having the argument, you're insisting that something is rotten and foul in Bethlehem, right? then go trade in your PlayStation. Well, nobody's talking about trading in their PlayStation 5. Okay. Then just choose to be miserable, I guess, or unhappy.
Bitrate say easy now.
And look, if you're just having the and this is what we always say, if you're just having the conversation, then just have the conversation. If you're just trying to have an intellectual exchange, what you're saying maybe makes sense. But then you put those in terms that aren't so hyperbolic, right? And aren't so tabloid oriented, and aren't so much part of a script of Jerry Springer, Geraldo Rivera, Maury Povich, right? Because that's not. Come on, man. Donahue was not tabloid. Donahue was probably the last vestige of reasonably level-headed talk show television.
He was in that episode with Vince McMahon.
Well, that was Vince, though.
Yeah, that was actually Vince. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And that's the thing. Like, I think it's fair to like I said, it's fair to be excited, want to see and wanting to see those things. But like you said, the hyperbolic responses to state of play. And I saw it like, oh, first party's not there. Just disappointing. This is trouble. If they don't show us something from first party, the next state of play, we got to question stuff. I'm like, do we really? It kind of reminds me of, if you remember at the start of this generation, when the PlayStation 5, I think reveal got postponed or something. Or something. There was something that got like, there was some kind of reveal or news.
Microsoft went fairly early.
Yeah.
How did it fold? It didn't. Wait.
I think Microsoft went first, and then PlayStation came later. And then,
I thought PlayStation went early, but didn't reveal a lot of information. I can't remember.
Oh, Mark Cerny did the what's it called? Mark Cerny did like that thing in March, which was, I thought, interesting, but I know put other people to sleep.
Right. Right.
And then they were supposed to show off the PlayStation 5, didn't. People were like, oh, they're not ready. They're retooling. They're afraid of Microsoft. There's leadership issues, and it's like, and here we are, lo and behold, the PlayStation 5 is doing very well and may wind up being Sony's second best selling console of all time. Yeah, the keynote, Brian. That's right. Yeah. So, it's the knee-jerk reactions, but at the same time, it's like, I feel like gamers, and this is the part that drives me crazy. Like, there are so many great games to play right now. And there was that tweet by George R. Martin. I got to pull this up. I think did you read that, Hamp?
I saw it come by my windshield. It was the thing about basically fans who are on social media are just basically there for negativity,
Yeah. I got to pull this up because I want to read it.
Now I will admit, I think I blew by this comment when it was originally made because, of course, George R. Martin in the final season of Game of Thrones, so he might be a little salty at social media fandom.
He might be. Someone's like, yeah, he's upset because he hasn't finished those damn books yet. But yeah, he says social media is dominated by anti-fans. He said toxicity is growing. It used to be fun talking about our favorite books and films and having spirited debates with fans who saw things different. But it's no longer enough to say, I did not like this book or this film, and here's why. People would rather talk about the stuff they hate, the stuff they love, and delight in dancing on the graves of anyone whose film has flopped. That is so true. That applies to gaming.
So this started, the story arc for this, for me, started back with comic book fans. So when Dan Slott, so if people, it's already fading into memory. There used to be a ton of comic book creators on Twitter, a ton. And back when I was reviewing
Logic, there used to be real quick. There used to be a lot of game developers on Twitter.
Yeah, that too.
That would interact with us in the community. That would come on our podcast. They're gone now. The gamers chased them away. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, and in particular when Dan Slott was doing his Spider-Man run, right? And Dan Slott got death threats. But a lot of these comic book creators, right, were engaging with fans. We were having a good time. As somebody who covered the comic book industry and was writing comic book reviews, they were very accessible. I often had back and forth with Scotty Young. Had not me so much directly, but I mean, Capullo followed me for a while. I had a good friend who, I did interviews with him, several times. They were definitely accessible. I interviewed Greg Rucka. They were reachable and they were accessible. And then a lot of them started making a mass exodus. And a lot of it started because of the toxicity of fandom, because there was no, the frequency of having like rational interactions with fans just started to decrease, and it started to become a lot of hate, a lot of disliking a thing, a lot of this notion that, Superman is this and Batman is that and this character is that and they would never do this. And I'm like, you guys have allowed you've had a synapse that's switched off in your brain to a point where you fail to recognize and understand like the nature of the industry and how IPs are deliberately given to different creative teams for the purpose of them doing something different with the character.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so it started there. It then spread to movies, right? Seemingly right in the time where superhero stuff was becoming the zeitgeist, but it became a lot of, there was never satisfying thing. I used to talk about this all the time about the like that people miss the generational flip where the nerds did inherit the earth, right? Like you and I both came up when it was not cool to be a nerd. Being a nerd was not something that you went to school and talked about.
Yeah,
right. Loudly.
It wasn't cool if you played video games. It wasn't cool if you read comic books. If you played Dungeons and Dragons, forget about it. Right. Like, and I played D&D, and like you were shunned.
Yeah. And so then there came this time, and I called it out. I was like, look, you guys have failed to recognize that the time came. The meek did inherit the earth. You guys who were all bullied and beat up, right, as kids growing up, like, people get it. You're cool now. You're the cool kids now, right? But they blew right through that era and immediately went to, now that we feel that we have some power, we're going to shit on everything, And I'm like, look, these creators have made themselves accessible. I get it. You may not agree with what they've done, or you may not like what they've done, but there's a reasonable, rational way to engage with a human being, right? But anonymity and basically, quite frankly, not getting your ass whooped, right? Mm-hmm. When you talk badly to somebody, just led to this extremely toxic behavior. And now we're seeing that, right? It probably happened at the same time, but we're seeing that with video games, and we're seeing it go to the extreme. I was just looking at a thing. I don't agree with a lot of, the vast majority of anything Jez Corden posts, but he was just, I just, was looking at a thing where he reposted, I think where Laura Bailey was talking about when The Last of Us Part 2 came out, how people were making threats against her son. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, that's a line you just don't cross.
It was her newborn son, and this is over her portrayal as Abby in a video game. Like, that's the part that kills me. Like, they are vile people in the gaming community, and I like, how, why? It's really unfortunate, because this is a form of entertainment, and just like you mentioned, like the comic book creators used to interact with fans on Twitter. Like I said, developers used to do the same thing. Like like, go back when I first arrived to the scene, if you will, on gaming Twitter. I mean, like, you would have conversations with developers. I mean, I was on a podcast with Mike Laidlaw, ex BioWare, and I'm like, this guy was behind Mass Effect, worked on Dragon Age. And he was like, and he would interact, and that's gone. It's gone. It's gone because people ruined it. They got upset in their feelings about video games. And the Laura Bailey thing is just, that's terrible. That's terrible.
And then you sit here. I mean, no offense, I'll take that off the table. Maybe it should offend somebody. But then you sit here and you complain when you're not told stuff, when you don't have a roadmap, right? When when a lot of information doesn't come out, where people don't play things close to the chest, where they and this is the thing that kills me, like, where you complain about when you're given sufficient information about a game that's coming out. And I'm like, look, maybe it's because when the game put out a trailer a year ago, the last time, you guys shit all over it. Games in pre-production, like, you nitwits. I'm sorry, and I'm addressing the people who just do this. You knuckleheads grab pieces of the trailer from Forza Motorsport or Gran Turismo, right, and compare it against a game that's already out. Like, I don't know that there's anything more stupid or ridiculous. Like, but even after the games are come out, you guys dissect these things down to the atomic level, right, to prove that one thing is better than the other. And I'm like, that to me does not translate to a love of video games.
No, it doesn't. And they also chastise developers on things like, they'll see like a preview or trailer. Oh, that looks like trash. And so it's like, like, if you're a developer, like, why do you want to waste your time interacting or updating a community that doesn't value the work that you do, or can't offer constructive criticism, or pretends to understand that they know how the development process works.
Well, and that's my big thing too. Like, because whenever I do things like this on Twitter, I always get the guy who comes up in my thread. so people can't complain. No, mofo, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you're going to come out your mouth, right, with some criticism, make it constructive. Here's the thing that we use in business. It's called actionable feedback. When you say something to me, if there's nothing I can do about that, then don't waste my time, right, telling me. Making a comment like that game's trash. Okay, what am I supposed to do about that? What action am I supposed to take that is money oriented, right? Because now I'm going to make an investment in level of effort of engineering labor hours expended to go do a thing. How do I know that I'm doing the right thing to address your criticism? I don't. You've given me ambiguous input, right? And I'm not. I don't take ambiguous input as requirements.
And trash isn't very detailed, by the way. Like, what is it about the game that's trash? Yeah. Because
how do I assess that it's just the thing that you don't like, right? Versus something actually rational that something can be done about.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think sometimes I think that's part of the reason we don't get updates on games, because they know. I mean, like, to see a voice actor choked up like that just, I mean, outside of being a father, and I couldn't imagine like someone threatening my newborn baby over a video game. I mean, that's just gut wrenching. And this isn't like an isolated incident, by the way. This happens with executives. It's happened with other developers. It's really unfortunate, and I just don't understand. And maybe this is because I'm showing my age now, but I don't remember people reacting that way to video games when I was growing up. People getting upset. We were just excited to get new games. And I feel like some of that's gotten lost somewhere. Look at the games that are releasing this month. Grandblue Fantasy, Suicide Squad. Would have credit Shinobi for this, by the way. He put out a great list of game releases. Persona 3. So the 3 games in the first 2 days of February. Foe Masters on the 6th. Helldivers 2 on the 8th. Banisher's Ghost of New Eden on the 13th. Tomb Raider Remastered on the 14th. Skull and Bones on the 16th. Mario vs. Donkey Kong on the 16th. Warhammer 40K Chaos Gate on the 20th. The Thumber, I don't know how to pronounce that. The Thumberger? I don't know how to pronounce that. On the 20th. Bandletale, A League of Legends story on the 21st. Nightingale on the 22nd. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons remake on the 28th. And in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on the 29th.
Did you mention Foam Stars?
I mentioned Foam Stars, yeah.
What is the Resident Evil 4 Gold Edition that's coming out on the 9th?
I didn't see that here in the list. I didn't see it on Shinobi's list. I'm reading off his list, but is that coming out on the 9th?
Supposedly. Did you mention Banishers?
I did, yeah. Ghost of New Eden, yep.
Okay, gotcha. Dragon Quest Builders?
I do not mention Dragon's Quest Builders now. But yeah, I mean, there's
it has been given an 8th by Game Informer.
Oh, has it?
Mention,
okay.
Yeah. Did you mention Tomb Raider Collection Remaster?
I did, yeah. The remaster, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always have to check up on you, man. You like to skip stuff that's not AAA.
Sir, I think I read some games that were not AAA. but you're not totally incorrect about my my love for AAA games. Yeah. See, you're probably surprised I didn't start off the list with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
right. Which releases the end of the friggin' month.
Exactly. But I mean, there's like for me as a gamer, I mean, like I have 3 games that I'm playing this month, and I won't finish those games. And then there's the month of March. I believe Dragon's Dogma 2 releases in March. It's like there's so many games. I don't understand why people are angry. I don't get it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I just feel like some of the conversation can be, look, for the $500 I spent, I really want 4 to 6 exclusive games per year, and I would really like to know. And by June, I would hope that like 2 or 3 would have come out in the first half of the year, and that by June I know the other 3. Like that's an articulation to me of what a rational statement is. And if it's if you're more demanding, that's fine. But again, I would in order for us to have a conversation about it, not just be you screaming into the void, toxically, I would need kind of that much meat on the bone, right, for us to have a conversation about it. But like I said, so much of Twitter is not encouraging a conversation. It's about just as our I think common mutual perpetuity / Black Immortal often says, it's people being critical just for the sake of, attracting attention.
Well, I think that's part of it too. Like there's content creators that are doing that just because they are making money off people's anger. They're misery merchants, as someone called them that. I don't know where I heard that from. Oh, Bitrate says, yeah. Go ahead.
I thought E's used that term.
I think E has. Yeah, I think you're right. I think Eric Jackson used that term. Bitrate's right. It's he says it's thaumaturgy.
Thaumaturgy.
Thaumaturgy. Yeah. It's a D&D spell name. I should have picked that up considering Baldur's Gate 3. It's an intimidation spell. I should have. That should have clicked for me considering the amount of time I put in Baldur's Gate 3. But no, but I don't disagree with you, Elijah. What's the next step? Like and again, this goes back to, I imagine that these consumers do this with other consumer products. They're not happy with something. It's like, oh, I'm not buying that again, or I'm going to take my business elsewhere. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to switch from T-Mobile to Verizon and maybe switch back to T-Mobile. But it's like you make choices instead of just yelling into the ether and getting angry.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is kind of, again, a common theme that we often refer to, which is those people don't matter. And those people in the crucible of Twitter, there's a lot of volume around a thought or a perception or a misunderstanding that those opinions are actually relevant.
Yeah, that's true.
And I shouldn't say relevant. They're relevant, but a lack of awareness that they are not in the majority of the industry, right? It's oh my God, there's not, and I know I'm saying PlayStation, and I'm not saying give PlayStation a pass, but I'm saying acknowledge and understand that sentiment doesn't carry to the response of the rest of the market. Mm-hmm. You're screaming that you're dissatisfied that PlayStation doesn't have a roadmap. And in the meantime, what I'm trying to tell you is that, yay, verily, but they're selling millions of consoles and making billions of dollars of revenue. Clearly, there's an indication that consumer confidence has not been shaken by the lack of a roadmap, right, to the order of magnitude that you're asserting that it is, right? It's the they showed up and they didn't show anything. I'm super disappointed. Okay, got it. Understand. Like there are sports fans that are disappointed when their team doesn't pass for 300 yards. I get it. That team's still 14-2. How badly do you want me to feel? They're going to the playoffs. Okay, like I get it.
Hey, you're a Commanders fan.
It's like I said earlier. It's like I said earlier today. Oh well, if you include Warren Moon's Canadian football numbers, and he's actually the best. Like I get it. Like you're disappointed, okay? but just understand, right? What how your feelings, and that's what this is all about. Your emotions, how they map to the reality of the quantification of the market, right? To understand when they're out of sync and be self-aware enough and maybe speak to that. It's like I just said before, right? I have nits, right, and things that make my uptake of a comic book oriented video game difficult, right? But I get that. I'm aware of that. I understand that other consumers approaching that game aren't going to have the hangups that I do, right? So I try to be careful about saying this is my perspective and how I feel given my personal biases, because yes, everyone has a bias. It's another thing you and I have been talking about. We there's this trumpeting narrative about, well, we want reviews to be entirely objective. Well, they're not, because everybody has a bias. Everybody comes up with a different socioeconomic background. They came, the guy who came up with raised by their mother isn't going to have the exact same biases as the person who came up in a 2-parent household, right? The kid who never had anything, right, isn't going to have the same biases as some other person. The kid who's a Star Wars fan is going to think differently. Like, everybody's got woven biases that are woven into the very psyche, right, of their perception of the world.
Yeah.
But again, if you're an active listener, right, if you're not so insular and only look inward and kind of look outward at the world around you, then you will recognize when, yes, you have a thing, but that thing is out of tune, right, with some other demographic or the majority.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I've said, like you said, like you and I have talked about this. Like the only objective pieces of a video game is like performance. Like if there's screen tearing, if there's frame rate drops. I mean, outside of that, you're right. I mean, it's objective. So,
yeah, or even time, right, or content, right, that's available, or I mean, there are definitely things that you can kind of measure.
Long. That's
right. Yeah,
that's objective.
Yeah, you quantify that, right?
Yeah, you can't argue that.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not you think that 80 hours is overstated its welcome, that's subjective.
But then you have people who still get mad. Why are you calling out that the game is only 15 hours? You didn't do that for the other game. Like, come on, man.
Oh my God. It's like someone complaining about IGN. IGN boys, they put the spoiler trailer, or the spoiler ending for. They put the ending on their YouTube channel for Suicide Squad. Oh my God, they would have done this for Gears or God of War. I'm like, don't watch it. Who cares? Don't stop. Like, stop. If you have a problem with IGN, stop talking about them. Just move on. Again, this goes back to like with other consumers. I'm starting to wonder, like, do people just like wallow in their own misery and do nothing about it?
Yeah, you know what it is.
Like, I hate my job, but I've been here 10 years. What?
It is the social media. It is the social media version of the lady who spilled coffee on herself and sued McDonald's. Right? It is the social media. Let me go deliberately, deterministically, like day to day, like consume this stuff, right? But complain about the fact, right, that you've made something that I want to consume. It's the people who say, I don't like microtransactions, so I'm not going to participate in them. But they shouldn't exist and they shouldn't be in the game because it makes me want them. Like, wait, hold on, what? Like, just like get over it. Like, don't, like, I don't get it.
Again, we don't do this for other. I say we, not me or you, but people. They don't do this with other consumer products. At least I hope they don't. I don't go to my Exxon gas station down the street and yell at them because they're 50 cents more than the other gas station down the street.
Yeah, I mean, I just complained about the Metacritic facelift, but like I've been yelling and screaming at Metacritic every day. Change it back.
Well, you just need to move on to OpenCritic.
I did. I will admit, I squawked at them one time, right after they did it. I was like, this makes no sense whatsoever. But like, I'm not out picketing I'm not out picketing Piggly Wiggly because milk prices went up by 25 cents.
Oh man, I haven't been at Piggly Wiggly in years. So, Ham, I got to ask you, out of all the games the list that we ran down for February, what are you picking up? Like, what other games are you going to be picking up? I know you mentioned like FOMO earlier with some of the other games that we talked about. You're seeing other people play, but like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, is that something you might pick up? I know you're going to pick up Skull and Bones because were you beta testing that? I don't remember.
I did. I participated in an alpha for Skull and Bones.
Okay.
So I will say, so I'm not going to commit to picking any of these up, but I will say, what I'm definitely keeping an eye on is I'm definitely keeping an eye on Banishers because I was high on that game from the moment I saw it. It looks like something that could be particularly in there. I forget who is publishing that. I thought I was also hopped up on that because of this is a Don't Nod game.
Oh, was that a Dotnod game?
Yeah.
Oh,
So very.
Okay. That has my attention now.
Yeah, it's a Dotnod game that's a little. I feel like it's a little more action oriented than what they normally do. So I'm very curious to see how this pulls off. So I'm keeping an eye on Banishers. Good chance. The Tomb Raider Remastered Collection is something that I might like to have for the Nintendo Switch, right? To take with me on the go. So I'm keeping an eye on that.
Who asked for that?
Who asked for any game to be ported to Switch? Why would you do that?
Yeah, why would you?
Seems anti-consumer. But I'm keeping an eye on Skull and Bones just to see, if it sticks to the landing, and if it gets. I mean, the unfortunate thing is, right again, like I said about Power World, you could disagree with me about the business model of Power World and claim all of its differences, but at the end of the day, I'm still going to say nobody wants to play a live service game that nobody else is playing. So.
There's some truth to that.
Skull and Bones needs uptake, right? It needs to build a community and gain some traction. So we will see how that goes. That's about it. I'm not a Final Fantasy type person. There's a lot of.
You've never played the Final Fantasy VII, then, like the original one. You never played that?
I played the original. I think did the original come to Game Pass? Like the original. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I played a little bit of it there.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I bypass, I'm not going to pick up Persona 3 because I played that when the Persona games first came to Game Pass. I don't know that I need to go back. So the big things for me, if I bypass Grandblue and I bypass Suicide Squad, then there's nothing else that I'm really, keeping an eye out on other than the Tomb Raider collection, Banished. The Star Wars Dark Forces remaster kind of interests me, but I just don't know how much of a lift they're going to be able to make with that game, and I don't know if it's going to get over my threshold of something that's like super interesting. I also feel like the Star Wars games of that era, like when now I'm forgetting the title, the first Kyle Katarn adventure. I played the second one. And then Jedi Academy. Like I feel like the games that came later, like Dark Forces Remastered, I know has a nostalgic place in people's hearts, but I felt like the games that came along after it were much better. So I just it's a remaster, it's not a remake, right? So that's the type of thing I was like, okay, that game might be worth it for you guys to actually remake it in order to give it a big enough lift. But that's about it for me.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of interested in Skull and Bones because when they first showed Skull and Bones, it just like my mind immediately went to the Assassin's Creed game, Black Flag.
Yeah, well, that's the engine. I mean, that's when development on it started was after Black Flag and build on the Black Flag engine. I mean, I will claim always that the biggest problem now, Skull and Bones had its own set of problems. It had its own stuff inflicted on it by Ubisoft and mismanagement, and I get it, right? Part of the like that game was in development hell for its own reasons and its own leadership. Part of its PR and uptake, though, I think the problem has been no one has paid enough attention to the game to really understand what it was. Like the media was immediately wrong about how they characterized that game and talked about how that game was. There were numerous media pundits who came out and said, "Yeah, I don't know what that game is," and I'm like, "Yeah, you don't know what the game is because you didn't pay any attention." Like people who understand maritime warfare, people who understand like the history of the pirate era in the Caribbean, people who are a little more studied on that era, I think have are able to grok where that game is coming from and what its spirit and intent is. And I just feel like I mean, we already know that I have a negative opinion about, quite frankly, the education level of a lot of people who are gaming journalists now, and I just I listen to some of them talk, and I'm like, do we teach history in high school anymore in the United States? So I just I just think there's been a vast lack of understanding of underpinnings of that game for a very long time.
Is there a lack of understanding what a journalist is?
Yeah. Well, you saw You saw the survey record that like what is it, like over 50% of like the average American certain like couldn't pass like a 5th grade civics test.
Well, are you serious?
Something like that? Yeah. I forget what it was. I saw that statistic somewhere.
That's actually bad.
It
like,
is.
People should like, if you want to cuss someone out, cuss our education system out. Like that is that is scary. These people actually grew up to, or I guess voting now, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to get super political, but I will just say this is not an affront at anyone's political perspective. I will say it feels often hypocritical that lots of U.S. citizens would have problems with immigrants who, immigrants tend to actually, because when they're going through the nationalization process, they're actually far more up on U.S. civics than like your average, high school student or American aged up through 35. So I feel bad that it seems problematic that people have negative opinions of people of that ilk, but yet, those people tend to be better at American civics and understanding how our government works than they are.
Well, that's actually true because, I went through that with my father, who came to this country and became a citizen. I think he finally became a citizen like 20 something years ago. My dad had been in the country for 43 years before becoming a citizen. And I remember like he was nervous, like he had to learn like what the 13 stripes on the US flag meant. And like it was like he had to learn everything. The 3 pillars of our government, what the executive branch did, what the judicial branch did. Like he had the legislative, like he had to learn all this stuff, and they quizzed him, and he had to pass. He had to know this stuff before he became a U.S. citizen. Like and I remember like he was nervous. He was like, "What if I forget?" I'm like, "You'll be fine, Dad." Like
So I do want to mention one thing, because you actually just put this in the BRAP chat, and so we've talked a lot about layoffs this year, and I've talked a lot about like causality and the notion that yes, there are layoffs happening in the gaming industry, but you need to understand that there are like 2 million like unfilled software developer jobs, or we talk about it all the time. Like, and you just posted that that unemployment is at an all-time low, 50 million new jobs created since 2021. Like, I think one of the things, and I'm not saying that this makes it okay for the layoffs that have occurred, but I will say that also an eye that people need to turn to this factor is you need to look at other things going on and recognize when because this will periodically and cyclically happen. Industries will get bloated with workers, and there will be a bleed off in those industries, and those workers will migrate over into other industries. And so when there are things like there are large layoffs happening in one industry, but overall there's low unemployment and tons of jobs being added, you need to recognize that like, there's a very good chance that probably those, you're seeing a migratory effect, right, in the economy of workers migrating over to another. That doesn't mean that it's fun. That doesn't mean that it's great. I mean, I do a lot of career counseling for a lot of technical professionals and a lot of engineers, and I've protéged many people through decades, right, of technical management and oversight. And one of the things that I constantly preach to people that they have to be prepared for is most people, I would contend, and a lot of high talented people, often where you wind up and where you go in your journey that you're on aren't like deterministically right followed. Like it's actually very rare that you grow up, you go to college, you major in what you'll actually get employed in, right? And then you go get a master's degree in the actual field that you're an expert in, right? And then you go get a doctorate or whatever, like in that actual field, and you stick with that, right, through a period of time. Like this isn't the era where you go and become an electrical engineer and you work at GE for 5 decades and you retire out of GE as an electrical engineer.
Get a nice pension, I might add too.
Right. Yeah. Like my first master's degree was not what my plan was. My second master's degree was way not what my plan was. And the positions that I've
how many master's degrees who asked for that?
Right. Hey, that's anti-consumer. Hey, college is a scam, is what I was told. So, so much of life and so much of your career is about look, be successful, perform hard when opportunities come up.
That's a great point. Yeah.
You know, and even going into that second master's degree, like I was pointed in another direction, right? I was being sent to go get a systems engineering degree. And there were various reasons why going to do that at that particular university were not a fit for my work-life balance at the time. And I made a decision, right, to find something that was a better work-life balance for me, and that set me on the path of software engineering. So it's just, that was, and you go to, in fact, out of that, like 10 years before then, I actually would say at work, I was like, I'm never going to do software. Like I was a hardware guy, and that world to me was very like tangible, and like hardware made sense. And I was like, you software guys, man, I don't get it. Like I'll never do that. Like that seems incredibly frustrating. So again, all of this is to go back to like feel remorse for people who have been laid off by all means. Absolutely. That's absolutely appropriate to do. Like keep an eye on the economy, keep an eye on, you know, what's going on, in other industries and other markets, and hope that those people land and just acknowledge the math that says, while those people are being laid off, there appear to be lots of opportunities, right? In other places, and so hopefully they'll land okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think there's been a lot of focus on the gaming industry, a lot of the layoffs, and it's not good. It's terrible, but some of it, a lot of it, is actually a result of what you just mentioned, and we saw it at big tech, just the bloating of hiring that happened during the pandemic. You know. Probably not sustainable. Well, I should say probably it wasn't sustainable as we know now, and that's why you're seeing some of these layoffs happen. But you're right. There is a migration effect. I could tell you just in my personal experience, when the big tech firms were laying people off, I mean there were years that we were trying to figure out, how can we get people from Amazon to come work for us? How can we get people from Microsoft to come work for us? And when those layoffs happen, we were getting tons of people from Amazon, Microsoft, and often to the point where we're like, okay, we were actually creating business cases and creating new requisitions to hire these people because they had desirable skill sets that we couldn't hire before because they had job security in the tech sector. So there's definitely that migration effect that you mentioned, Logic, and the interesting thing with the job numbers and What kind of surprised me is that 350,000 jobs in the month of January, and unemployment is at 3.7%. So, not to get political, but we have an election coming up, and I'm just kind of surprised that our current president's numbers are the way they are, considering that the economy. If you look at other parts of the world, I mean, the other parts of the world, they were. I mean, we had the recessionary impacts here, but we didn't have it like the UK. Other European nations were hit by recessions. We somehow we didn't hit that recession that everyone thought we were going to hit, and the job market's been pretty like good throughout this whole thing. So yeah. I mean, I'm shocked. Like it kind of defies like what I've seen growing up. It's interesting.
Yeah, and and just to kind of push it, back more kind of centered to gaming. The other thing I would mention is I think you and I talked about this before, but also recognize that yes, Microsoft laid off 1,900 people. Yeah. Out of the gaming division. Again, keep an eye right on the tea leaves and see where things go. But I would strongly wonder, given what things I said earlier in this episode, right, that. Hey, there's a transition going on. There are new target lines for business strategy out of that division. If I think about, I need to build a hybrid compute gaming platform. I'm going to just put things in this perspective. It's not to be like I probably need different developers than I have sitting at Toys for Bob. And so what I probably think will happen is I probably think strongly that Xbox will be staffing back up as they've laid people off. They're probably going to be staffing and adding more jobs back of different types of people that they need. Maybe more DevOps people, maybe additional like architects that they need. to help build these systems out. More cloud people. So the skill sets will change and they'll evolve over the time of an industry. They'll change based on a given company's strategy, and hopefully, and they'll be bringing in more people. The sad thing is maybe they don't need as many artists, right? Or other types of given labor categories and skill sets. But hopefully the industry, overall will continue heading in a direction. Hopefully people who are out of work, will hopefully retrain, or go find other work, and hopefully that'll work out. But from a perspective of keeping an eye on the businesses and where they're headed, again, definitely keep an eye on Xbox and kind of, the types of things they will have to build. They're putting Call of Duty right on the Nintendo Switch. You don't do that with less people, right? You inherently kind of need more people than you were using to build Call of Duty before. But again, you probably need people with a different skill set, right? Than, like I said, you have sitting at Toys for Bob, or some of these other divisions.
Yeah, Warwana's throwing shade at the U.S. right now. He's saying, so the two best choices for America were those two dudes. Oh man.
Oh, was he talking about what you were saying about the election?
Yeah, he's like, how did I get elected? And I told him why. He's like, so the two best choices for America were those two guys. I'm like, yep.
Hey, don't take that bait. Don't take that bait. Hey, he's throwing bait in chat. Don't take it.
Look,
just let that go.
Yeah, no, fair question, but one we won't answer tonight. So you and I have talked about that though. About choices, yeah, but we won't. Yeah. All right. Oh, well, one more thing I wanted to cover before we wrap up here, Hamp, is the rumors from Moore's Law about a new PlayStation handheld. Did you see that?
Yes, I saw it.
All right. So what do you think? I mean, Moore's Law tends to be, somewhat reliable, I think. But according to Moore's Law, a new PlayStation handheld powered by AMD, is in early development. Will have 18 CUs, 1.0 gigahertz, or slower GPU to maintain compatibility with PS4 and PS5 titles.
Yeah, what I really have to say is I really need to go watch his video, because unfortunately, like I just talked about journalists, right? And just the fact that our current bumper crop of journalists are not the sharpest tools in the shed when it comes to reporting on hardware in particularly. And Moore's Law is very much a propeller head type of podcast, right? So I just don't. I saw that and I immediately saw people posting that there were discrepancies between what was being reported in the article versus what he said in the video. You and I talked when we did the big analysis and breakdown of the Xbox leak, and just how there were just journalists getting things like way wrong and hyper focusing on things that were not the most important thing out of the leak. In his coverage, right, really, shed a big light on that side. So I really need to go, because I want to say what I saw as this was being posted was that a lot of his video was more about what AMD was doing, and how that could be applied in a mobile handheld, or would be a reason why a mobile handheld could be supported by PlayStation, or maybe would be supported, but it was less of a definitive throwing the gauntlet down that PlayStation was building a mobile handheld. But again, I could be wrong, but I just want to kind of go read it myself.
Okay.
Listen to it myself, I should say.
Yeah. And actually, I just ran with the articles that were written up, so I need to do my due diligence and actually listen to the podcast where he talks about this. But if this is true, I kind of find it interesting, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did do this, because, like, as we talked about, like, they're a hardware manufacturer and their approach is kind of Apple-esque in a lot of ways, and I know a lot of people were asking about with the portal. They're asking, well, why couldn't we get a successor to the Vita? And if this thing's real, then I'm thinking it's probably going to be something like along the lines of like a Steam Deck for the PlayStation.
Yeah. I mean, I listened to the first couple minutes of it. And it was much more about here's how it could make sense or why it would make sense, and why, like, just because the Vita failed doesn't mean that a PlayStation has. So I like I said, I'll go listen to it myself, rather than some young punk college kid at a at a college who doesn't know the difference.
Hey man, leave Francisco.
I'll listen to it myself.
Leave Francisco alone. He works for WCCF Tech. He's trying to pay off his student loans. Come on.
Right. I mean, and what I was going to say was, yes, there's so when we talked about the PlayStation Portal, I will admit that I said at the time they've already learned this lesson. The competitive facets that they're looking at are actually worse now than what they were looking at when they shut down the Vita, right? Where they were mounting up for the Vita. Because even as they were getting ready to launch the Vita, I was saying, and people were saying, why would you launch this device in a world where the iPhone exists and where tablets exist? Like, you're going to be competing and skating uphill. Nintendo has a chokehold on the industry with the DS, DSi, 3DS, 2DS, whatever. And that kind of proved out to be the case. And and now things seem to be worse. And then you're also competing with them. We talked about how when the Nintendo Switch came out, that one of its challenges it faced was that it was going after raw components that were the same ones that people were gobbling up for phones. And so as Apple locked down supply chains, right, that made life very difficult for Nintendo. But what I will say is, now looking at the world, this year, there's wiggle room to say, well, I don't know, that it would make zero sense. Again, if you look at production volume that is similar to a PlayStation Portal play, I mean, that could be a big difference, right? PlayStation Vita, there was a push to make it mass market, to get it out to millions and millions of people, to have it rival and challenge the 3DS or whatever the Nintendo handheld was at the time. But where we said PlayStation Portal makes sense, and even like the Link headphones make sense, is like, look, PSVR 2. If you're making a boutique product and a luxury product for the people who love living inside your walled garden and love coming home and going into their man cave, woman cave, whatever, and like turning the lights on and seeing their display of all Sony PlayStation gear, right? We've often talked about how you go back to the 90s and there were people who were Sony component stereo people. And they would they
had the Walkman, the stereo system, the TV.
Yeah, they liked everything Sony. Yeah, so if you want to make a low volume play like that, maybe that makes sense. But where it doesn't make sense and where you cause problems, and you need to figure things like that out. This is part of the rhetoric going on about the PSVR 2 that I don't understand. I said one of the reasons why I said why it didn't make sense to make a handheld when you're building the Portal is because you now need to, like a studio can't concurrently make a game for a platform like that runs on inherently entirely different hardware and a different abstraction layer than your desktop size console, because it then bleeds resources off of that studio. So you're either going to basically take that studio out of the batting rotation, right, for your grown-up console, or you're going to have to open new consoles that are dedicated, right? It causes problems in your software production pipeline because you're doing something inherently different than your mainstream. And that's, to me, where it broke like the economic sense. But there are a few different things now. If you build a handheld, now because we have this crop of PC handhelds, if you build a handheld on x86 architecture, like the other handhelds are, like your desktop console are, there's probably less of a delta, right, between the games that you're building for that. And with the what we're talking about seeing with the Nintendo Switch come along, if the gap gets closed between what that thing is and a low end PC or how do I want to say it, like a low end high end console, then maybe there's enough efficiency, right, in the limit of the gap between those for it to be okay.
Rumors are Switch is going to be like on par like PS4 or something.
Yeah. So I mean, so those factors could play into it. I think that's but like I said, the things that I saw in the comments, right, lead me to believe that this is more of what he's talking about. But the big crux is if AMD is doing something with their roadmap where processing power on same architecture, same instruction set, right? That uses SSE1, SSE2, SSE3. If those types, if AMD is building a platform that suits your needs, that run on those same low-level primitive software technologies and foundations, then again, you're pointing in a direction where that makes sense. If they're building an APU that meets your needs, that is just a derivative and something that is much closer to what you're putting on your desktop console, then that can make those things easier. But that's not what AMD was doing, at this stage, right, when they were trying to put the portal out. So, those kind of things could make a difference. But we'll see.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think for me, like if this thing is true, like it would make sense. You talk about like that walled garden having, all things PlayStation, that kind of boutique, high end hardware. I mean, that to me, like that screams Sony. I mean, like I think I may have mentioned this to you, like their philosophy on, not really showing their TVs, or actually not showing their TVs at all at the what's it called at CES.
CES.
Yeah, because they have viewed their TV set, their TV line now as, hey, we're not making TVs for the mass market in ways like TCL is. Like we're trying to appeal to that more, we're trying to present our TVs and cater to a different consumer demographic. We want to present our TVs like they're luxury items, they're high end devices, things like that. So, so that would make sense to me in that regard, where Sony could offer this higher end portable device compared to the PlayStation Portal that would appeal to someone who wants that, somebody who may want that higher end handheld experience. So.
Yeah, but I still feel kind of like what I was saying before.
Yeah,
I think the targeting and the marketing around that would be for that to be a companion device within a PlayStation 5 ecosystem. Not like the PlayStation Portable was maybe sort of kind of a companion device, but it was more of a, it was also marketed and pushed as a standalone mobile device to onboard new customers into into the PlayStation ecosystem. Or they were fine with you buying some other console and then also buying a PlayStation 5 as your 2P. But I think this will be much more of a play of those of you who are already in the walled garden. We want you to invest more in the walled garden. Like it's not going to be hey, Apple. Those of you. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're going to sell you more stuff.
Yeah, it's not going to be, hey, you guys who are on Xbox and Nintendo, if you don't want to spend all the money on a PlayStation 5, we're fine if you buy the PlayStation portable thing to toe dip in our ecosystem. That being said, that's leading me down the path of saying probably not going to be inexpensive and cheap, right?
And then they'll sell you new earbuds to go along with that shiny new toy you just got.
Well, I'm guessing and thinking that, again, we go back to please stop acting and behaving and thinking that these companies aren't looking 3 to 5 years down the road, because again, the Insomniac leak should have told you that they are. That makes me think that the earbuds now make more sense if they're going to be more PlayStation Link devices that use that audio technology, right?
That's a great point. Yeah.
So yeah,
that's a great point. All right, Logic. So that's I don't have any other topics unless there's something else you want to discuss. But actually, real quick, Star Wars Outlaws. Someone mentioned in the live chat that it could be, I think it's tentatively set for 2024. Have they confirmed that release date? We were talking about the Star Wars games earlier. Someone mentioned that in the live chat.
No, I mean, I think the best indicator that we have is, I think during their last earnings call, they mentioned that there was a big marquee AAA game that was originally going to come out in Q1 calendar year, I think, or at least they said first half, that they're now pushing out to second half. And, there's strong suspicion that that's Star Wars Outlaws, because, what else would it be?
Yeah. God, I hope that game's good. I mean, it's massive entertainment. I hope it's good. I mean, I'm dying for a good Star Wars game. So, but here Donner says Star Wars Outlaws, please be September. Yeah. So that's it for topics. Again, unless you have something you want to discuss, Logic, if you want to maybe go back to the WWE discussion we had earlier. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up the show.
No, man. I think we bled a lot of the topics dry.
Yeah. So, I gotta get back to some gaming. I gotta play some Persona 3 Reload. So, but yeah, thank you everyone for hanging out with us this evening. Really appreciate the support as always. If you haven't done so, please hit the like button. And if you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you are alerted when we go live. And Logic, I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, let everyone know they can find you.
Yeah, if you want to swing by the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast over on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, please do. We are live at 8:45 p.m. on Sunday nights. We are a heavily news-oriented show. I will say, again, this isn't to throw any shade at our agenda tonight, but like as a for instance, like we wouldn't have talked about like the PlayStation Vita thing. Just because we knuckle down on things that have been officially reported. So it's just my point is saying that it's a slightly different show.
Yeah,
it's not for everyone. Please don't come by if you're trying to like score points to mount up for the console war or think that's kind of what it's oriented on. We just don't go down that path. But if you do want to stop by, please do. I think
no, it's always a great show. And actually, I like that it's different from like what you just described. Like that, it's not like what the kind of conversation that we typically have here. It's more like news oriented. So yeah, definitely check them out.
Yeah, and that's not to throw shade at what we do here. Like
no, not at all.
If I had a problem with what we did here, then I would be on the show. Right? I'm just saying. Exactly. I'm just saying the content arrangement and the target line is
might be sending more WWE gifts to me.
Oh man!
Hey, yeah, never break kayfabe. By the way, you can't break kayfabe.
I know, man. I thought I was going to at least make it 24 hours, but I couldn't.
Look, like I said to you, man. Like that was impressive. I was like, and I'm thinking like, this has got to be a work. And I'm like, I don't know though. Oh man, I'm telling you, you should be in the WWE. You should have your own stable. So, yeah, but all right, Logic, always a pleasure. Thank you everyone in the live chat for coming by and hanging out with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Again, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notification, and we'll be back next Wednesday. Actually, Mooch is joining us next Wednesday, so we'll be live at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So come out, hang out with us, talk about video games, give some more impressions on, or at least I will. Get more impressions on Grandblue Fantasy Relink and Persona 3 Reload on next week's show. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.